Welcome to Politics for Happy People. I'm your host, Ashley Vaughn.
And I'm Joseph Backholm. So glad to have you with us. Where today, Ashley, we're talking about, school board civil disobedience, something like that?
Yes, we're talking about school boards not doing what they're supposed to do, Joseph. They are not.
As in not educating children?
Well,
is that the problem, or is that a different problem?
That's a different problem that we can discuss another day.
Okay.
How they're not.
There are many layers to the school board problem.
Doing a good job educating the children, but they are being naughty in other ways too, and that is that they are not following the law, neither state law nor directives handed down by the Trump administration. And this matters because our schools in North Carolina here and in every state, they receive funding from the federal government and from the state government. And they are under the authority of state law, and they need to follow it, but they're not. So we're going to get into that.
¿Por qué no? Why are they not following the law?
Well, that's a big question. And at the end of the day, the answer to that is because they are ideologically opposed, many of them, to the law in North Carolina that has been passed by the General Assembly. And today we're going to talk about 3 laws in particular. One of those is HB 805, which was passed into law last year.
Right.
And it requires...
HB 805 was the bill number of the law that was passed.
Yes.
That is
well, that's not the name.
Not a law, but yes.
Well, yeah, you're right.
I'm
you're
quibbling.
Right.
Yes.
You are quibbling with me, but you can do that because you're an attorney. Every once in a while,
and
you
I
can
will.
act like an attorney.
We are so annoying. They tell us as a profession, right? Yes.
Okay, so this law says that overnight field trips, K through 12 schools must require boys to only room with boys and girls to only room with girls. So they have to be segregated by biological sex. So you can't, a boy who says, oh, I think I'm a girl or I feel like a girl today, cannot then room with a girl. So believe it or not, there actually are counties in our state that do not have a policy requiring that, even after it became state law.
After requiring them to have that policy.
Yes, that's correct. And then we're also going to talk about 2 other bills that became law. One is
well
the
done.
Parents'
You're
Bill
such a
of
fast
Rights.
learner. Yes.
The Parents' Bill of Rights, which requires that if a student wants to change their name or pronoun at school, that the parents be notified of that. So that's one of the pieces of the Parents' Bill of Rights, and that school districts are not in compliance with. The other is the requirement that we don't teach gender identity to kindergarten through 4th grade. So there are also school districts that don't have a policy that states that they will not do that.
And let's just remind our audience why these are even necessary. The part about overnight field trips, and that bill was passed last year, and I guess this is not overnight field trips specifically, but a related kind of like overnight accommodations issue. The University of North Carolina at Charlotte, right, is the one who recently just announced, because of this, we are going to stop putting boys into the girls' dorm rooms. And we've heard stories of young women who go off to college and they indicate that they prefer a female roommate because, of course, they do in their dorm room. And wouldn't you know it, the university sends in a guy who's experiencing an identity crisis who believes he's a girl and expects the girl to be fine with it. Those are the things that, the ideology of people running these institutions is leftist, and they have embraced this idea that if you say you are a woman, then you are a woman, and we're going to treat you like that. And so we're going to give you a female roommate and try to tell your female roommate that you're actually female when everybody in the world knows you're not. So those are real world situations that are happening, and then at the lower school level as well. And I mean, like, high school, middle school, when they are taking field trips. Same kind of situations where if you have activists making decisions in those particular environments, they would be inclined to create really uncomfortable situations, and the state legislature says you can't. And then similarly when it comes to notifying parents, I think everybody's kind of heard the stories about the schools conspiring with students against the parents to keep parents in the dark.
Lawsuits have come out of other states.
Yes, and most of us believe that parents have a right to know with what's going on with their child, but there's a lot of professionals in the education bureaucracy who believe that parents who would not be excited about that forfeit the right to know, and therefore they will conspire with the student, with the child, against the parents to keep them ignorant. The state legislature has again said, you can't do that. Parents have a right to know these things. And despite those laws, there are still people within the system who are like, we don't care.
That's right. So the third piece that we're going to look at today has to do with sports. And it's North Carolina has a law that men and boys cannot participate in women and girls sports in K through 12 and at the university level. And so there are some school districts that are not in compliance with that as well. Going back to what you're saying about the ideology kind of behind this refusal to adopt policies that are consistent with the law, I mean it's just very interesting. I've watched some school board meetings and kind of seen these people, like for instance in Chapel Hill, Carrboro City Schools, kind of discussing what their options are when it comes to adopting a policy that they truly in their hearts disagree with. And it really seems to me that they are stuck in this belief that these policies are somehow harming and truly discriminatory against people who have gender confusion. I mean, they truly believe that these are mean, that these laws are like, they really, really believe that. Like, I try to put myself in their shoes, like, okay, what are these people, why are they doing, like, who is okay with a boy going into a girl's bathroom and the myriad of situations that can cause? Usually, you try to understand and put yourself in their mind, and they really do feel that that these trans or gender confused students are somehow being left out or hated on, or themselves being put in an unsafe situation. And it goes back to, at the end of the day, a difference in the belief about what is best really for these gender confused students themselves. Because we believe it's best for them to be reoriented with biological reality and protected from bad situations in a truly opposite sex private space. But they believe that the best thing for them and the path to their happiness is to affirm what they think to be true, which is that they're trapped in the wrong body. So it's just very interesting. It's, in my mind, that is the piece that where we're not agreeing, we're not meeting at all, and that's the battleground that we have here, and what underlies, I mean, I think a lot of this reticence to really adopt these policies.
A couple things there. Agree that this is ultimately a difference of opinion about the source of truth. And we should assume the best about the motives of people on the other side, because I'm convinced that most of us are not sociopaths. We are all trying to do the right thing as we understand it. But the difference between the left and the right generally on this issue is, what is the source of truth? Is the source of truth our feelings, or is it some kind of fixed reality that exists independent of our feelings, like our biology? Is our identity determined by how we feel, or by our sexual reproductive system that we were born with, right? That's kind of the question. What is our point of reference that determines what is true? So we don't have to assume bad things about their motives. They just have a very different understanding of what makes us happy, how you become happy. And yes, and because they think feelings are the source of truth, they think it is always harmful, always discriminatory, always wrong to tell people to ignore their feelings, because from a secular perspective, that's how you achieve happiness, is by following your heart, is doing the thing that's going to make you feel happy, by living authentically. Those are the buzz terms that they use, that they think are the way to be happy. And they really want kids to be happy, and they believe the way these kids are happy. But there's another point in this, right? Because they are hyperfixated on the feelings and identity of these kids they've identified as trans. What they do not consider is the other people involved in these situations that we're talking about, is the parents, who ostensibly have rights and in fact do have rights.
Yeah.
The college students who would have a boy identifying as a female in their dorm room. Do they have rights? Well, yes, but the critical theory framework that the left exists in does not have permission to consider the rights of the other people involved in these situations, because they are, from their perspective, the oppressors. And so the reason why they care deeply, deeply, deeply about the rights of the kid who thinks he's a girl is because in that scenario, that's the oppressed person, and we care very, very much about them. But they genuinely don't even have permission in their kind of analysis to care about the feelings of the other people, even though they would claim to be even extreme empaths. We care about feelings. We just care about the feelings of the right people, right? And so that's kind of the friction, is what you and I and a lot of other people are encouraging everybody to do. Yes, this kid with an identity crisis matters, is created in the image of God. We value them. We want them to be happy. But so do the other people that they go to school with, they go to class with, that they would want to play sports with. They all also have rights. And so we have to consider everybody's rights at the same time, and try to reach a conclusion that doesn't just require most people to sit down and shut up. And that's kind of the different, I think, approach that we have to these situations, is whose rights are we going to think about?
Yeah. And I think one thing that a wise person said to me once, which sounds really simple, but I've gone back to it many times in my life. Your feelings matter, but you don't always get what you want. It's like, we can care about people's feelings, whatever they may be, whatever their struggles are, and still say no, and still say, actually, this isn't what's best for you, and it's causing harm to other people as well. So we can say to this person who is struggling with their identity, truly, a true struggle, which there are many sources of that struggle that we've identified, but it is a true struggle, and we can say, we care about your feelings. We care that you're having this identity crisis, and yet we still can't let you go into this bathroom. We still can't let you play this sport. We still have to honor and recognize your parents' rights and responsibility and authority over your life. We're not going to undermine them. We're not going to get in, educators, whoever, counselors, doctors, we're not going to get in the way of that God-ordained relationship.
And to me, the question there is there a greater good than your feelings? Because you're right, feelings do matter to whoever it is that said that to you. Is your feelings matter, but you don't always get what you want. And in the moments in which you don't get what you want, it's because there's a greater good. You feel like eating ice cream for breakfast, I would tell my children when they're 2 years old. But the greater good is, let's not become diabetics, right? So we're not going to do that. And then, that's a silly example, perhaps, but it's relevant in our lives, is I feel like doing that thing that, I feel like killing my coworker. But we don't do that because there's a greater good, right? We all have impulses and feelings that we recognize should not be acted upon, because our feelings are a very unreliable guide to what is good for us. Sometimes goodness and our feelings align. Very often they do not, which is why the feeling is relevant. It's real. We deal with it, but we just do not obey the feeling.
blindly. That's right. That's right. Okay, so we're going to have a guest on today.
Yes.
That's going to help us sort through a lot of this. She's the expert. She is our general counsel, Mary Summa, and we're going to bring her on right now. Welcome, Mary. Thanks so much for being with us today. What we're talking about this week is school boards who are not in compliance with state law. And we've run through the different bills that we have done our research on. And we just wanted to ask you a couple of questions about what it means to not be in compliance with state law. And the first question that I have is, so I see here that there are a lot of school districts that do not have policies stating that they will comply, for example, with HB 805 and the requirement that boys not room with girls on overnight field trips. Are those counties required to have a policy?
Yeah, 805 is a little bit different from SB 49 and 574. SB 49 was the Parents' Bill of Rights, and HB 574 was the bill that prevented boys from participating in girls' sports. 805 specifically requires a policy, and there's 21 counties that have no policy. 3 counties of the 4 that had specific policies dealing with sleeping quarters based on gender identity, 3 of the 4 have never changed their policy. So in effect, you have 24 counties that are not in compliance with state law.
Mary, about that, I've heard it often said that you should not attribute to malice what can be attributed to incompetence. And so when you talk about these school districts that have not adopted a policy, even though the state has required that, do you think, is this really a bunch of defiant school districts who are saying, no, we will not do this because we disagree? Is some of it just like they haven't got around to it because maybe they didn't even know and they're just like busy with other things?
I think it's a combination of both. I think you have a lot of very red counties, mountain, rural counties that if you look at their, go into their policies and look at them, they haven't amended them even like since 2016, 2018, long before the Parents' Bill of Rights was passed. So I think in part, perhaps it's not an issue in their county, therefore they haven't really addressed it or see the need to address it or even know that they need to address it. So I would never impose any kind of intent on their part why they're not doing it, but perhaps with some information and with some knowledge, once they find out that they need to amend the policies, they will do so. And I think that's probably the majority of the counties that are on this list. Now, there are some CMS, Orange, and Asheville City schools who have policies specifically on overnight field trips based on gender identity. And in one county, Buncombe County had a policy on basing sleeping quarters on or overnight field trips on gender identity. And after 805 passed, they went back and amended their policy saying that sleeping quarters would be based on biology. So, but the other 3 that specifically list overnight field trips have not amended their policy as required by 805.
So do you interpret that to mean that they are actually consciously adopting a policy that is inconsistent with what the state has told them to do?
I'm not going to say that because I don't know it for certain. You can speculate that's the case, but they do have a policy on the books that is directly in violation currently of 805 because they will base overnight field trip participation on gender and gender identity. And I would hope that with this information, these are smart people, that they would amend their policies.
So HB 805 did require a change in policy, but some of these other requirements are not required to be a policy. So when it comes to something like the requirement to notify parents to a change in name or pronouns, or when it comes to the prohibition on teaching gender identity in K through 4, if they haven't adopted a policy saying they're going to follow the law, how are parents or anyone supposed to know that they are following the law? Are we supposed to just wait until we hear stories of what they're doing in the schools, that they're not following it? What can we do?
Well, I would encourage in those counties that are not, and there's a number of them that have, they may have let's go back to the language. SB 49 only required a procedure for a change of name or pronoun in terms of notification of parents. That was something that was discussed in the Chapel Hill Carborough hearing, where the oversight committee brought in the superintendent from that school district and said, "Where's your policy?" And he said, "We don't have a policy, we have a procedure." And everybody was all up in arms, but in fact, SB 49 only required a procedure. Having said that, the majority of counties follow the recommendations of the North Carolina School Board Association, which is a nonprofit organization that helps counties. I think you have to pay to participate, but they will basically submit drafts to the county regarding or for policies that are in compliance with state law. Most of your counties have policies, even though only required to have a procedure. They have policies regarding notification of name, if a notification to a parent if there's a change of a name or pronoun. But you're not right, Ashley, unless it's written down and people can read it. How are parents supposed to know that they have this right, as stated in SB 49 in the state law? And it's interesting, Orange County, they do have a policy, but they said if in fact you were the child asked for their name to be changed prior to the enactment of SB 49, we don't even need to notify parents. So it's interesting how some of these counties, the blue counties, the larger blue counties, are trying to get around even the notification to parents, which is a very sad commentary in light of what we now know about the dangers of social transitioning. Social transitioning is changes of names and pronouns, change of dress, change of haircut, access to bathrooms, access to sports. Those are all part of the social transitioning, which research now shows sends you on a pathway to medical and surgical transitioning. So parents are basically in the dark, or they're, spectators. They're not required to give consent. They're only required to be notified.
I want to specifically ask you, Mary, about Buncombe County and this issue of notification of parents, because it says here in the policy that the school principal or their designee should speak with the student first as to ascertain concerns the student may have about notifying the parent. And these situations must be addressed on a case-by-case basis, balancing the student's requests with the requirements of state and federal law. Does that concern you, that they're saying they're gonna balance what the student is requesting them to do with the law?
Yeah, and the real problem there, they can put all the language they want in there, but the real problem, and I think the legislators are trying to wake up to this fact. NC Values has been pushing this for years, since I joined the staff several years ago, that we need to have enforcement. And without enforcement, some of these counties will wiggle out of it as best they can, similar to this sort of wishy-washy language in Buncombe, similar to what Orange County is doing with notifications of names and pronouns. So unless there's a clear and definitive enforcement penalty for schools that don't comply with the law, you're going to see counties continue to try to wiggle out of these requirements. One of the most, in terms of notification to parents, you've got 4 or 5 counties in the state that have gender transitioning plans. They may notify the parent about a change of name or pronoun, but they say very clearly that they may or may not notify the parent regarding other things that are being done to help to socially transition a child. So your child may be a boy using a girl's bathroom, and you don't know about it. And I think that's something, even we're focused a lot of times on the parent of the child having to endure, the girl who is having to endure the boy in the bathroom. Sometimes the parents of that boy don't even know that their son is using the girl's bathroom. So all of this is a blatant violation of parental rights, as we now know.
Mary, you just raised the question about enforcement, and I want to go up one level and talk about the implications with the federal government, because we've seen recently investigations in Loudoun County, Virginia, about their failure to comply with the Trump administration's executive orders on related issues. Do school districts in North Carolina risk the loss of federal funds for education if they don't get in line with federal policy, not necessarily the state policy, but is the loss of money a real issue here?
I think it is. You've had, on the bathroom issue in particular, I believe there's 3 complaints that have been filed with the Office of Civil Rights from Buncombe County, 3 that have been filed from Cabarrus County, all involving boys and girls bathrooms. In Buncombe County, it's from what I'm understanding from a mother of twins. Her name is Anita Lays. In her high school, her twin girls encounter boys in the girls' bathrooms every single day, and so those complaints have been filed. I'm getting ready to try to get Secretary McMahon, to consider those complaints, because right now they're just sitting in the Office of Civil Rights and nothing's being done. So that's on my list to do this week, is to try to get a letter to some congressmen, one in particular, to try to get him to put some pressure on McMahon to address these complaints, because they're real. And these girls are scared to use the bathroom. As basic as that sounds, they can't even use the bathroom. The boys loiter in the bathroom. They're in the locker rooms. They're sitting there staring at the girls. And these are not boys in skirts. These are boys with beards and short and cargo shorts on. That they say they're a girl, and they have, whether they really think they are or not, and they're accessing it's a free for all in these girls' bathrooms, and the girls are really suffering from it.
Thank you so much for being with us today. Is there anything else you feel you need to add?
I just think we need to have enforcement provisions to withhold state funding if the counties don't comply with state law. We can pass all the laws we want, but if the counties ignore them, and there needs to be a withholding. It needs to be a clear withholding of funds, and it needs to be swift withholding of funds until they're in compliance. And until you do that, if we're relying on lawsuits by parents, we've had parents are afraid to come out because of the retribution their children may suffer as a result. So we need to take the bull by the horns, give the auditor the authority to audit these counties, make sure they're in compliance, and if they're not, withhold their funds until they are in compliance. This is a serious issue. It has real victims, and we need to do something to protect these girls.
Well, thank you, Mary. And Ashley, as we let her go, I think the last point that she makes there is money is the language that bureaucrats speak. And it's true in law that you can pass all the laws you want requiring anything that you want, but if there's no enforcement mechanism, it's just a suggestion.
Well, it's common sense.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, it is. It's common sense.
As a mom, I have to establish a little, a little justice system.
That's right.
In my household.
That's right.
And I promise you, I can make all the rules that I want.
Yes.
But if there are no consequences,
well,
not one of my little angels
yes.
will listen to me at all.
Ashley, I think we've talked about, do you know that I was a sociology major in undergrad?
We need to talk about this.
One of my life's great regrets is being a sociology major in undergrad. But here's something that I did learn.
How has God used that in your life, Jason?
He can use the broken, tragic mistakes of our lives and still turn it into good, right? But this is one thing that I did remember in my sociology studies at the University of Washington was deterrence theory. And it's relevant to what we're talking about right now. Because deterrence theory posits that the laws that you pass will deter the behavior you do not want. The degree to which you will deter anything depends on the severity, the certainty, and the swiftness of the penalty, right? And very often it comes up in the consequence of like criminal law. Very often people ask, does the death penalty deter murder? Does the law that you have against petty theft actually deter petty theft? And the theory is it depends on the severity, the certainty, and the swiftness of the penalty. So if it's not severe, if you're not even afraid of the punishment, or you're not at all certain that there will be a punishment, or it's not going to happen quickly, if at all, then the deterrent effect is lost. And of course, the knowledge that you're going to lose your head 15 minutes after you do it is very likely to deter you from doing it because it's severe, certain, and swift. But to the degree those things do not exist, it ceases to deter the behavior you're trying to deter. So in this context, we're talking about whether school boards are going to comply with the state mandates on this, and they are unknowingly, but kind of how humans operate, wondering how severe is the punishment, how certain is the punishment, and how swift will it be? And if those things don't exist, they're going to be like, thanks for your input.
Yeah. And I also take Mary's point that as long as we're relying on families bringing lawsuits, that puts the onus on the families.
Correct.
And
that's the burden.
It is wrong. And we've seen, even in the last couple of weeks, we've seen families, speaking out about males in the female bathrooms in the schools. Right now, there's no law, state law against that, which we hope will change soon. But we have seen the families that have spoken out against this problem really face backlash in their community.
For real.
They have faced real hate. They have faced threats. And it should not be that way. The people who are in charge of our schools, our school districts, really do need to change the policies and not put the burden on the families to fight for what I truly believe is their right, their parental rights, the rights of the girls to safety and privacy. It's very sad that they have to fight for that or sue for that. The fact that we have these school boards that are so, ideologically opposed to these right and just conditions, requires, I think, our General Assembly to make it clear what they should be doing and to enforce that.
And also on the enforcement question, when we mention that we're putting the burden on the families, in reality, in these situations, you're putting the burden on middle school and high school
Kids.
girls.
Yes.
And so much of the kind of awakening around this issue, around the issues of gender, have taken place because a lot of young women have courageously come forward and told the truth and told their stories and suffered the consequences for it. But that shouldn't be the only way this happens. And for those who are listening and engaged in all this, so I would encourage you to be courageous. Because, don't stop saying the truth, because
That's
we
right.
die a little inside every time we self-censor, and we're afraid to say the thing that we know is true because we're afraid of the consequences. That's not a great way to live. At the same time, those who are in leadership and who are not ninth grade girls, right, need to understand the dynamic there, and the adults should take upon ourselves the responsibility of being the ones to protect the children.
That's right.
If you are a child, sometimes you get called to those moments where you have to do the courageous thing. Do the courageous thing.
Yes. Absolutely.
Adults, don't look at that situation and say, yeah, let's let the ninth graders handle it.
Oh, yeah. Well, any sort of leadership position comes
Correct.
with responsibility, whether it's a parent or a teacher or a principal or, the superintendent. You have responsibility to the people and to the domains over which you have authority. And I do hope some of these some of these people will look inside and think and think again, because the situation is wrong when you're allowing conditions to be just unsafe and confusing for kids. I was talking to a girl a couple weeks ago who told me that, at her high school, they did allow boys to go in the girls' bathrooms, and there was a boy who came in, who I guess identified as a girl, and I will make that assumption because evidently he was coming into the bathroom. He had a beard, but he also wore lipstick and heels, and he was coming into the bathroom, and he was looking through the cracks in the stalls at her and her friends on a regular basis. And she said that she and her friends were just so unkind to him about this, and she felt bad about that. And I said, if you feel bad about that, there's forgiveness for that. But at the same time, it's really the adults in charge who have left all the children to figure this out for themselves in the bathroom.
I don't, that situation you described there, I don't know the specifics of that, but I have a hard time thinking that girl she should have been unkind to that young man.
But my
doing
point
that.
is,
That's not a moment for gentleness, in my opinion.
My point is, you're creating these crazy situations where the kids are trying to figure it out on their own because the adults are afraid to take a stand and do what's right. Either they are totally with this idea of, trans rights, or they're just afraid to say anything, which we've seen as well. They don't want to be controversial or political. And it's both of those, but that's wrong. They need to do something. This is my point about leadership and responsibility.
And also for that girl, and as you tell that story, it's what she's encountering there is actual evil, right? When you have this perverted, confused young man who wants to just peep on his female classmates, right? When you encounter evil, it's okay to not be gentle, right? And we need to give our kids permission for that, to not feel bad about it. Do you need to be kind? That needs to be a defining part of your character. You also need to have the capacity to say no in very strong, forceful terms to things that are difficult. And there is also a moment in which you must cross the line from gentility to actual force in opposition to evil, if that is the thing that is necessary to defend the innocents. And in that situation, there's actually innocence that needs to be defended. And it shouldn't be middle school girls or high school girls that are doing the defending of the evil. But those girls need to feel permission that when you see something that is unequivocally wrong happening, you don't have to feel bad about being a bit aggressive about it, raising your voice about it, and making it stop.
Yeah, we are required to be kind, but we have to be nice all the time. That's not.
We do not have to be nice all the time. And sometimes love is aggressive.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think about what I teach my own kids and under what circumstances are you allowed to defend yourself? I mean, these are more complicated lessons, but I think you're right when you say that there are times to be firm and assertive in saying no. This is wrong. This is not right, and that will not always be perceived as nice and cuddly and fluffy and all of that.
Well, this has been thought through deeply in our self-defense laws, right? In the criminal law statute context, is you have the right to self-defense when the use of the force that you use is proportional to the threat, and you have a reasonable fear of imminent death or serious bodily harm. That's the standard. If a reasonable person in your situation would perceive serious bodily harm or death is going to happen, you can respond with even deadly force. So, put that in a bathroom context. No, you should not kill the young man who is doing those things, right? We're not arguing for that because it has to be proportional. But there is a reasonable fear of imminent threat, because those are invasions of privacy, and who knows, you have no way of knowing what the other plans are, right?
Well, it's illegal to
It's a real
peep on
threat
people
that
when
is
they're
imminent, that is ongoing, and so yes, you have a right to do something about it.
Yeah. So going back to the point, though, I think is that we are letting kids be in these situations to figure this out on their own.
Correct.
And that's, again, that's a crime. It's a crime to peep on someone. It's a crime to expose yourself to someone, which we've had reports of happening in North Carolina.
Right.
It's a crime to, obviously, sexually assault someone, which we know has happened, in Loudoun County. We have concerns of that happening here. We don't want that to happen. We want to prevent that. And so, yes.
Reasonable boundaries will
Yes.
prevent that from happening.
Yes.
And that's essentially what we're asking for in school districts. I think that's what the state has mandated, is reasonable boundaries that meet the expectations of privacy and safety for both the parents and the students.
Yes.
And when you don't want to abide by reasonable boundaries because of your ideology, that's your problem.
And thankfully, the General Assembly has made this clear in multiple areas when it comes to overnight field trips, when it comes to notifying parents and involving them with changes to names and pronouns, prohibiting teaching gender ideology in K through 4, no boys and girls sports. These things have been made clear already in our state law, and we do support, as Mary said, stronger enforcement mechanisms for those, and we also hope that the General Assembly will do more and make it clear that we don't want boys and girls private spaces, certainly in K through 12, but really also in other places too, like rape crisis centers and in prisons as well. So we will keep everyone updated as this evolves this session. I think, I would love to see the General Assembly act on this issue of private spaces. I do believe it's very urgent, and I think taking action before something really bad happens is wise and important and urgent. And I know that in Loudoun County, Virginia, that they're being investigated because by the Office of Civil Rights because of this very issue, because they haven't kept the boys out of the girls' bathrooms in those schools, and they do have a case of a boy recording victims in the bathroom over years. And again, we don't want these kinds of things happening in North Carolina. So hopefully we will move towards making a change.
Hear, hear. Let's make it happen.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Please join us every Tuesday and Friday. We will have new episodes drop on those days. And if you liked what you heard today, we would appreciate it if you would subscribe and